What's up everybody and welcome back to another video. Today is the part 2 of the carbohydrate series. In this episode we'll be discussing everything that you need to know about sugar. Artificial sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners, sugar alcohols, natural forms of sugars, and everything in between. So without further ado, let's jump into it. All right, so I'm super excited to be bringing this video to you guys because this has been a long time coming. I get asked questions about sugar all the time, and that's because there's a lot of misleading information out there. A lot of people, including my family members, think that there's healthier forms of sugar. The classic debate of honey as a healthy form of sugar compared to that of table sugar, which you might use in your coffee in the morning. So let's go ahead and look at those two molecules and see if you can spot any differences. So on the left, table sugar. On the right, honey. Did you notice any differences? Because I certainly didn't. That's because they're the same sugar. Table sugar, also known as sucrose, is the same sugar that's in honey. The difference here is one is derived from bees and the other is chemically made in a lab or a processing plant or derived from cane sugar. So not all sugars are created equal, and we'll address that today, but I just wanted to nip that one in the bud because let's be honest, sugar is sugar. Your body only recognizes one type of language, and that language is chemistry, people. All right? So when it sees a molecule, it absorbs it and it puts it through a pathway. It's as simple as that. There are no healthy forms of sugar. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and address the four most basic, most important sugars out there. So the four most basic forms of sugar are glucose, fructose, galactose, and ribose. These are the most important sugars that you guys need to know about. Glucose, for us mammals, is what allows us to be able to make energy, exercise, move our muscles, and also fuel our brains. Fructose comes from fruit, as the name suggests. Galactose is one part of what makes up a lot of sugars in lactose or milk and dairy products. And last but not least, ribose, which is the sugar backbone that makes up the double helix of our DNA. So those are the four most basic sugars, also known as monosaccharides. Saccharides are just a fancy word used by scientists for sugar. So I'm going to use those interchangeably for today's video, so don't be alarmed when you hear the word saccharide. It just means sugar. Next up, we have the disaccharides. Di just means two. So disaccharides is two sugars. So now we're starting to pair sugars together. And these you might be a lot more familiar with. The first example is sucrose. So remember table sugar and honey, the first example I gave you? Well, sucrose is just made up of one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. The next one is lactose. Lactose is just one part galactose and one part glucose. So you can start to see it's just two parts of sugars, right? Last one is maltose. That is glucose and glucose paired together. Maltose can be commonly found in bread, bagels, a lot of baked goods, things like that, pizza doughs, right? So as we start to build longer and longer sugars, the names are going to become more complicated, but you have to be aware of these because if you're knowledgeable about these types of sugars, you can read a nutrition label and be confident that you know exactly what you're eating. That's kind of the purpose of today's video, is educating you so you know what you're eating and why you're eating it, which is really important. Next up, we have polysaccharides. Poly just means many, so we have many sugars, and the only examples that we're going to go over today are the ones that are relevant to you. So we're going to talk about storage forms of sugar. So our body stores sugar in the form of glycogen in both our liver and our muscles. So when I talk about glycogen in any other future videos, just remember that glycogen is just glucose in its stored form. Think of them as like branched chains. They're just chains of sugars that are tied together so they can't leave the cells. Well, plants also have this same storage form of sugar, but we have a different name for it. It's called starch. So anytime you've heard of like starchy vegetables, for instance, potatoes, think long chains of sugars. Starch is a storage form in plants. Glycogen is a storage form in mammals and in us. All right? So that's all you need to know about polysaccharides. Oh, but wait, I actually have one really fun fact that I want to share with you guys. So your liver can actually store up to 100 grams of sugar, and it takes anywhere from 24 to roughly 30 hours to deplete that glycogen storage. Your muscles, however, can store up to 500 grams of glycogen, and that's what allows them to be able to do work, squats, run, bike, swim, all those fun things. And it also helps to fuel your brain when your body needs it. Next up, we have sugar alcohols, also known as polyols. Sugar alcohols can be commonly found in fruits, vegetables, and even mushrooms. You might have seen them in some food products, specifically diabetic products or any diet shakes. A lot of keto products have sugar alcohols in them, protein bars. The reason why they use these is because they're half the calories. Sugar alcohols are half the calories of regular sugar. They also don't cause tooth decay. You get that sweet taste that you like. It doesn't cause nearly as much of a spike in blood sugar, which would cause weight gain. And they actually feed beneficial bacteria in your large intestines. So there seems to be a lot of positives with sugar alcohols, which is why you see a lot of health products have them in there. Some names to look out for on the backs of food labels would be erythritol, isomalt, xylitol, and maltitol. Those are the four most common sugar alcohols that you'll find out there on food products. For the most part, they're relatively safe and they don't seem to have too many side effects, but I do want to go over the list of side effects out there that people have noticed from just regular consumption. So part of the thing with sugar alcohols is our body doesn't fully absorb them. Some of it gets absorbed in the small intestines, but it passes through our gut and sits in our large intestines where it's then fermented by these bacteria. Now this leads me into some of the side effects. If you consume too many sugar alcohols, that bacteria is going to ferment those and cause gas, which you'll notice as bloating or excessive flatulence. It also tends to have a bit of a laxative effect, so it may cause diarrhea or other issues with your GI tract. If you guys suffer from IBS or GI distress, then I would recommend avoiding sugar alcohols, as you see in the low FODMAP diet, which is prescribed to most people with IBS. It seems to be really effective, and one of the things to avoid on that low FODMAP diet is sugar alcohols. So just something to keep in mind, but when you're consuming them, just be aware of how your body feels and try not to overdo it with sugar alcohols. All right, last but not least, probably the most exciting topic, what you guys have all been waiting for in today's video, is artificial sweeteners. The four most common artificial sweeteners out there are aspartame, stevia, sucralose, and saccharin. These names might sound familiar to you, but if you didn't know, or you're living under a rock, aspartame is probably the most widely used artificial sweetener out there. Its nickname or most common name is NutraSweet, and it's most commonly found in diet sodas and diet drinks. Saccharin for a long time there was banned in the UK and in Canada. The US and FDA were kind of wavering on whether or not it was food safe, but they've now deemed artificial sweeteners as safe to consume, which is why they're so widely used. But there's a lot of controversial information out there. So we're gonna address the questions one at a time, and we're gonna start off by how these artificial sweeteners are made. Okay, so let's look at aspartame as our primary example of how artificial sweeteners are made, since it's the most widely used. To make aspartame, scientists are gonna combine two amino acids and an alcohol. Phenylalanine, aspartic acid are the two aminos, and we're gonna combine methanol, which is the alcohol, put it into a fermentation process, and voila, you have aspartame, a non-nutritive sweetener, which means that it's 0 calories and it doesn't spike your blood sugar. Seems like kind of a miracle, right? Wrong. Our body does metabolize aspartame. Even though it has no impact on our blood sugar, it gets broken down into its constituents, which are phenylalanine and aspartic acid. Phenylalanine has some serious side effects. So let's go ahead and take a look at what those side effects are and some of the health implications of consuming aspartame and other artificial sweeteners. And to do that, I'm gonna pull up a couple of pieces of research here to support my argument as to why I think artificial sweeteners are probably not a good idea to be consuming right now. First up, we have aspartame has been reported to be accountable for neurological and behavioral disturbances in people. The metabolite phenylalanine, which I mentioned earlier, appears to alter brain neurochemistry, compositions such as dopamine and serotonin. Some have observed neurophysiological symptoms such as headaches, memory loss, mood changes, as well as depression. Okay, let's look at the next piece of research. The process of uptake, storage, compartmentalization, and distribution of aspartame within the body is associated with metabolic disorders and various clinical conditions. Okay, let's go ahead and look at another study. Several publications, and this is looking at all the research between 1980 and 2006 done on aspartame. Several publications showed long-term consumptions of aspartame led to dose-dependent increased productions of free radicals in renal tissue, which is your kidneys, as well as kidney injury. This research was done on animal models. So we got to keep the fact that this was done on animal models in mind because it wasn't in humans. But when we start to see compounding research looking at the negative side effects of artificial sweeteners, and there's lots of debate going on there, and people don't know whether or not it's safe or if it's okay to consume just in moderation, I think that should put us on the side of caution. Let's be cautious about consuming artificial sweeteners because we don't know the long-term side effects of this because they're relatively new, right? And if we're just relying on epidemiological studies, which is what most people say, oh, it's safe, it's no big deal. I don't know if it's no big deal when we're seeing cancer on the rise, diabetes, obesity, overconsumption, and metabolic disorder. We're seeing behavioral disorders, mental disorders, depression. And when we see that artificial sweetener seems to play a role in the neurochemistry that we have, especially our dopamine and serotonin levels, which is what makes you feel good, makes you feel happy, rewarded, satisfied. If it's playing with that, it's messing around with your hormones, and it potentially causes weight gain and a whole bunch of other side effects, then I think it's safe to say that artificial sweeteners are not safe. They're not a good idea to consume. So I'll just leave it at that, but leave your guys' comments. If you found any research out there that supports a different claim, leave it down in the comment section below. I'd be really curious to hear what you guys have to say. But that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you guys like this, don't forget to leave me a like. Don't forget to subscribe because we are going to be doing a part 3 to this carbohydrate series. The next video, we're breaking down fiber, talking about insoluble fiber, soluble fiber, how much you should be consuming, what are the best foods to be adding to your diet. So don't miss it. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be healthy, be active, and be yourself. Everyone's got something to give this world. You just got to go out there and give it. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.